Hi, and welcome to Fit Kids Conversations, where we talk about health and fitness for children and their parents, their communities, all working together to make sure kids get all of the physical, mental, social, emotional benefits of exercise, physical activity. I'm here with Laura M. Wilde, a holistic mental performance practitioner, and she's going to tell us a little bit about what that actually means and all the different components of her practice. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you, David. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
What do we mental performance, holistic mental performance coach? What does that mean?
Basically, I'm trying to capture that the work I do is not, simply mental performance, but I'm adding in healing work, conscious healing, energy healing, because if we just look at the mind, then we become no different from a practitioner who only looks at the knee and not the whole body or the stress or the connection of the knee to the hip. So it's just a way of being, holistic mind, body, spirit with athletes.
Terrific. And I know you've got quite the background working with NBA athletes and the like. Can you run us through some of that?
Oh, yeah. So I basically, I was a college coach, and then I always wanted to be in the NBA, especially as a player. When I was in high school, that was my goal, right? So, and a few years ago, I started working with the LA Clippers and as their mental performance coach. And of course, when you work with an NBA team and trades happen, you've made relationships with athletes who shift and move to different teams. So, just based on the trades that have happened the last year, it's almost like, you know, the Clippers are, dispersed throughout the league now. And I also work with my favorite thing to do with Major League Baseball players is pitchers. So I have a couple of them on my roster as well, and WNBA, of course. I don't leave the women out of this.
So, what is the actual energy healing part of your job? How does it look and feel for you and for the athlete you're working with?
Yeah, I'd say one of my favorite ways that I've heard it described. I mean, and when he described it like this, Deepak Chopra wasn't really describing in particular my work, but he said, there's a thing called quantum biology. So we're not just a bag of bones and muscles and ligaments and tendons, but we're actually, a bag full of our experiences, our emotions, our triggers, our traumas, and what we've gone through in life, plus the bones, and then ligaments, and they all, are affecting each other. So we have to look at the whole body and notice that not only do our, experiences of our own lifetimes matter, but we actually have to look at the, epigenetic markers that might have been left on our DNA from some of the traumas that our ancestors have gone through. Does that make sense? I mean, did I describe that in a way that you think can carry over to, like, what does it actually mean?
Yes, I've studied a little bit about epigenetics, and so much of that came to the fore in the wake of George Floyd's murder and some of the social uprisings and new understandings that we came to in this country about African American experience. I expect that's true in Jewish descendants of Holocaust survivors and immigrants from Mexico or Central America who have generations of trauma. And there's a good amount written about that. Can you talk a little bit about how that affects your work? I mean, if you're working with primarily African American athletes in the NBA, is there a whole new set of things that you need to be concerned about in terms of epigenetics?
Absolutely. And actually what you mentioned with the Holocaust, the actual main science, the original science on that was done from people whose ancestors went through the Holocaust. And so epigenetic markers, could be someone's lifestyle or serious trauma they've gone through, right? Or even if there was a famine, and then if there's a famine, then those children and grandchildren have epigenetic markers on them. So the way it applies in particular to the pro athletes I've worked with is when someone says, your free throws are kind of off, go work with the shooting coach. And I like, oh, excuse me, wait a minute, let's think about this for a second, right? So if someone's practiced their free throws a million times and they're still not great at free throws during the game, it's got to be something besides just the body mechanics. And so what I've understood in my exploration and my studies is that if we imagine an African American person standing there on the free throw line, and you could, go back to 5 or 6 or 7 generations for that person, they probably have an ancestor who was enslaved and in fact was probably traded, from plantation to plantation. So this free throw at the line in front of a lot of people, sometimes jeering, angry fans against them, could create this PTSD moment. And at that moment, when they don't even understand, right? It's unconscious, something bubbles up and the stress hits their body, all their muscles and fascia go weak. And so now the free throw that they, nail every day in practice when they're hanging out with their guys or their girls and their coaches and having a good time and they're in the flow, they might not be in flow in the game, in which case their body changes. And so all the mechanics they've learned and practiced go out the window. And so they have to, shoot a free throw with the same mechanics that they learned it and perfected it to. But it's impossible if our body is thrown into fight or flight and we don't have these tools to calm it, or if we haven't worked with someone, like me or colleagues of mine, to remove some of the epigenetics through epigenetics energy medicine.
So to go back to an earlier question for elaboration, what does it look like? Are they lying on a table like a massage table or something like that? Are you running your hands over them or within inches of their bodies to move energy waves, or how does it work?
I would say it's a blend of intuition and energy work. So someone would either sit next to me on a chair or they could lie on a massage table. It doesn't really matter. And it's sort of like touch therapy, but it doesn't have to be. Sometimes they don't want that. They're not comfortable with that. And so it's not really moving energy. I would say it's more about like observing, like more like quantum physics, because an intuitive practitioner like me will be able to kind of root out through using a very advanced form of muscle testing and find out where exactly in the body something's being held, so. And, it's blended with Chinese medicine. So, for example, we know that the liver in general holds anger, right? We know that our stomach holds our worry, as does our spleen. And so I'm actually learning intuitively exactly where that person is holding their fear, their sadness, their worry, anger, grief, or the epigenetic markers. And as a trained observer, my connection with them can help that dissipate.
Wow. That sounds like very valuable work. And it sounds like something that would produce some real kind of deep emotional moments. So without exposing anybody's privacies and vulnerabilities, can you just talk a little bit about that and how you and the athlete react when those sorts of things arise?
I would say that, eyes definitely get damp, and wet sometimes. I mean, and I had a pretty, powerful practice before I specifically focus on athletes. And so people do have experiences what's good about it is that we're not talking through it all the time. Once in a while, there might be words that need to be exchanged, but people kind of know, or they'll just have this feeling, right? Their feelings kind of bubble up and then the moment passes. They don't stay in that state because once acknowledged, then this trauma can dissipate. It's more, the reason we struggle, I think, and have a hard time moving past situations is because we're not understanding what's hidden there in the subconscious mind. And so once we have the awareness, I like to say that awareness is the gift. And so once we have an awareness that this is happening, we suddenly are free of it. And so then it's almost like our personality changes. We become a different person because we're no longer fighting against a hidden, I might even call it a demon. It's like, oh, there was something, present in me that was holding me back and I've released it. And so now I'm free to go on about my life and live my best life because even if I, talk through it, if it's still hanging out in my liver or my kidneys or my lungs, then the second it returns, I'm helpless against it. And so what I'd like to do is combine the mind-body stuff so that the mind, once it is free of something, if the body's also free of it, it doesn't just show up again the next morning or the next day. And so it's really important to have these, root out the problems and not just, and I think talk therapy is very valuable. And I think going even deeper and, helping the body dissipate the stuff that it hangs on to is really important for the whole athlete's health.
So we've talked so far about the effects of the epigenetic markers on pro athletes, on adults. At Fit Kids, of course, we're focused on kids primarily in grades K-8. And I'm curious if there is practice for those kids, or if not a full-on practice, at least some things that their teachers, parents, coaches can be aware of to help them through those situations.
Yeah, one of the things I do when I work with kids is when they say things like, I'm sad, I'm scared. So I like to acknowledge that. And I say, let's kind of shift into there is fear. Do you have to own the fear all the way? Or can you say, there is fear? And so I help them start to observe their thoughts so they're not, taking them in even further with the claims, I am scared. Okay, I'm scared. And what does that mean? And how do you kind of observe that feeling of being scared and say, oh, there is fear there. I notice the fear. Where did it come from? And to start to kind of link back so that they become aware of the moments when they're stressed. And I think it is important to have kids go, oh, I think I'm getting stressed now, because they may not notice it, the way that we as adults do. And I think the other thing is to get, kids to kind of understand that the mind can create situations in the body, and the body can create situations in the mind that, can tank us in a game or in school. And so having a really important and powerful mantra for them, so when I have like an 8th grader who's being bullied, I have them do something really simple. They just tap over their heart center and say, I am okay. There's that moment when they're bullied, they're upset, the tears want to come out. Maybe they run away to the bathroom, or, class is over and they get away from the kids. And the way they recenter themselves and bring their nervous system out of fight or flight back into rest and relaxation is just a tap here and say, I am okay. Because just in that one tap, and I have them focus on breathing in through the nose, out through the nose to regulate the nervous system. And that one little tapping and that one statement, they can reset their nervous systems and give themselves a chance to see the next moment and make a choice that the next moment can be better. So I think it's important to have them come up with a ritual to get themselves out of that situation.
Amazing. So the kids you work with, are they primarily athletes, or just anybody in need of healing, or what?
Yeah, well, I used to work with a lot of kids in my private practice, of holistic healing. And then now that I've gone to athletes, I usually, I've worked with some really young kids, like 10 and 11-year-olds, when I've had parents come to me and they go, I know you normally work with older kids, but can you work with our kid? And what I found is that I love it. It's really interesting, right, to work with a 10-year-old. I mean, if I work with a 10-year-old and then I go work with a 22-year-old, I can literally see, even though they're different people, I go, oh, at 10, I mean, I understand this, from a clinical and from studying it, but then I can really see, wow, this kid at 10 could be like that athlete at 22 if we don't shift this. And then I recognize where the athletes just didn't get the things, the interventions they needed along the way to help themselves help themselves. So, yeah, so I actually worked with a 4-year-old once. The mom was like, just for fun, would you work with my 4 and 6-year-olds? I was like, fun. So I did a 4-minute session, because that's about all that a 4 and a 6-year-old would hang out for me with me for. But I used some tools and props and talked about, feelings and how to recover. And any kid, even a 4-year-old who plays soccer, can think about when they get upset or angry if they don't get the ball passed to them, or, if their teammates mad at them, or, kids can be with each other. So it was really eye-opening to notice that sometimes even at 4, 5, or 6 years old, the kids start to forget about the joy of their sport. And so I think it's really important when we're working with kids to always remind them that to go back to joy, just to find presence, to be where their feet are. And so be where your feet are. That's one of my favorite things to use with athletes of all ages. Where are your feet? Okay, are you where your feet are? Or are you thinking about what happened when your feet were down the field? Or are you thinking about what's going to happen when you're at home? So getting them to have a simple mantra like be where your feet are has been really helpful. I'll add one more thing. A lot of times with kids, teaching them breath work can be like, what is this? So I teach them to use elevator breathing. So I say, oh, just receive an elevator breath, take an elevator breath. And they just imagine an elevator starting at their feet, moving all the way up as they breathe in through their nose. The elevator stops at the top, it opens up, and all the bad thoughts and the negativity, I'm stupid, he's stupid, all those things fly out. Elevator doors close, and it moves down our body to kind of refresh us. And then I have them let the elevator breath move back up the body while they inhale again, and they can go, okay, now I'm settled. And so an elevator breath can be a really powerful way to change their state.
Well, that's wonderful, because it's so relatable to a child. Some of what we've talked about so far is pretty deep and adult. but to have such simplistic language for a child to use to envision what he or she should do to improve their feelings is remarkable. Do you have any more of those in addition to elevator breath?
I mean, the other thing, probably more adult, I have kids think of their 3 gems. You know, what are your 3 gems that you can use? And so it's like 3 things you can say. And it's really helpful when they, oh, I noticed a negative thought. I noticed that I just called myself stupid. So when I call myself stupid, instead I say, I am unstoppable. And they say it 3 times. And so as parents, we can hear our kids saying these things. You know, he's now 11, I have actually 12, a 12-year-old nephew. And I had to learn with him starting, you know, when he was 7 or 8, I started working with him a little bit. And so 3 gems, you know, if you hear yourself say, I'm stupid, what's that voice in your head say? It said, you're stupid. What's our gem, you know, our diamond, right? Instead of the dirt, we have the diamond. The diamond would be, I am unstoppable. I am unstoppable. I am unstoppable. And then if you're upset at someone else, you know, you can say, you know, he's okay or she's okay. Because, you know, the kids learn early to blame the refs. They learn early to be upset with their teammates. And I think as parents, we can often guide them to that direction, you know, accidentally or however that happens. And so just having kids have, you know, key phrases and things ready to go. The tool that when they start to notice the voice in their head is going down, they're going like in the tank, right? The tank from Positive Coaching Alliance, they actually go up and they have, what's the diamond? What can you say? There's a diamond, a shiny diamond. I am unstoppable. And so I think things like that are important to have for kids, just ready to go where, you know, and making it visual. Everyone knows that all kids have heard of a diamond. They think of diamonds as, you know, these multi-billion-dollar pieces of jewelry, right?
Can you talk a little bit about differences that you may have noticed in the response to treatment among relatively affluent kids versus those who are, say, from underserved communities and likely to have experienced or witnessed major trauma?
The kids who, you know, come from, you know, wealthier families or even middle-class families, it's, you know, they have resources, a lot of resources, and they're here and they're there and they're everywhere. They're at their schools, and they usually use the resources in general to get better or to get over a one lifetime trauma, right? But the other kids that I've worked with or even seen, whether they're young or older, who have had a lifetime filled with trauma, you know, I mean, you know, I've had athletes where, you know, their best friend was killed, then their dad was killed, then this uncle's in prison, like things like that, where there's so much surrounding them. And there is a difference because oftentimes what they do is turn to the community or, you know, a parent to heal or a grandparent to heal, and they don't naturally seek help. You know, maybe there's this sort of idea that it's expensive to do that, but I think it's changing and there are resources, you know, that are starting to be offered in all communities. And many of the schools are adding in mental health counselors, which has helped. But I do feel that the Black community, and this is something that, you know, I've leaders and other psychologists in that community, we all come to this kind of understanding is that seeking therapy is not really something that's people are accustomed to in the Black community. It's becoming more popular. It's becoming more okay. But for a long time, I think parents and, you know, teenagers thought that nothing's wrong with my head. That's kind of, nothing's wrong with my head. You know, it's like nothing, no, you're right. Nothing's wrong with your head. Talking to someone does not mean that you are, you know, psycho. I mean, people really think if I talk to someone who's going to help me with mental health, I must be crazy. And so to kind of cut the cord of crazy therapists and just let it be, I want to get better. So I will work with someone. And so to me, I always say to the kids, you know what? This will help you get better at basketball. And who doesn't want that? And so just kind of tying it to the sport, you know, so often, you know, kids who come from communities where they struggle every day find they can throw themselves into their sport for that practice. And for those, that 1 or 2 hours, their life is amazing. And that's why they get in the zone. They could be really throwing themselves into their sport because they heal during that hour or 2. And that's where they're most at peace. And so to bring it back to their sport and say, hey, this will help with your sport, I think is one of the easiest ways that I've gotten, you know, the athletes I work with to open up and come and work with me.
I have to ask, knowing your son Adrian is a phenomenal ballet dancer, if you put this to work on him and what his response has been.
He loves the work I do. He's actually quite the champion. You know, he and I have strategy sessions about how to grow the work and which direction to be taking it. He actually had me come talk to his ballet class of the elite dancers he's working with. I came and spoke with them. Now I only spoke with them once, but they did go on to be the best, do the best in competition that anyone's ever done in the history of the school last weekend. So, so my son is definitely a product of my work, I would say. Especially, he's really a product of the energy medicine, because when he and his girlfriend were in Russia, she's a prima ballerina. When they were there, people would say, gosh, you guys are so healthy. Because in general, they just didn't miss from injuries when most are. And he was, oh, my mama, it's my mama. So they're the beneficiaries. Certainly, they know how to get in the zone. They know how to be healthy. And I taught them techniques to do like energy medicine on themselves. And there are many techniques that at some other point, I'm happy to share them, and they can easily be shared online, on Zoom, in calls, because there are techniques, and people can literally change their health, shift their injury, change their mindset by using these techniques in combination with some of the other holistic mental performance techniques.
Cool. I'm also curious how the energy healing interacts with the child's level of physical activity and with diet. Is this something that happens chemically, whether that's in terms of endorphins, whether that's in terms of vitamins and minerals from diet, or anything like that enhances the effects of the energy healing?
One of the things that it tends to help is to have a chance to have a conversation with kids about what they eat, and to be noticing if something, gives them a stomach ache. But I think I'll give us a quick story that might help explain this. So there was a child who wasn't growing very fast. And when I did my intuitive sort of assessment, it was like, oh, the pituitary gland is a little bit blocked, right? And so it's not really seeing the proper hormones for this child to grow. And so doing a session, a few different sessions over time with that child, seemed like it unlocked whatever the block was, and that child, grew again. And I mean, we were concerned the child would be super short and then, struggle a little bit in life. And the goal was like, at least get to close to average height. So it seemed like there was a growth spurt that happened after that. So the energy medicine for kids is as beneficial as for anyone, because if we can, get someone to have a strong mind-body connection and to train the body not to live in fight or flight, they're going to be healthier forever. And so I would say, if I had to sum up what the energy medicine does, is it helps the person return to rest and relax more quickly when we go into fight or flight, so that you can kind of chill a little bit, but you're still intense. You still want to win. You can still be aggressive and assertive and love your sport and be joyful, but you don't get so caught up in your thoughts that you block some of that joy. And so just imagine, when something stressful happens, if you can forget it and move past it quickly. And so working with someone with the mind-body energy medicine helps that happen, because let's say I've had 10 incidences of trauma and they're hanging out in my body. Let's just, for example, hanging out in the kidney. Well, the 11th one just makes it worse. What if we can kind of dissipate those? We keep the wisdom, so we know not to, go down that road or jump off the playground apparatus, because we've learned our lessons. And then we actually shift the mindset so that we let go of things quickly, instead of all the things stacking up and just causing this tape to play over and over in our mind that kind of drive us into the dirt. And so we get the mind to quickly clear and let go of the junk, of the overthinking, the negative thinking. And then that makes us a healthier person physically. So it's almost like the physical healing is a side effect, if you will.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
Yeah. It's like, oh, and my knee got better. Because
Right.
we did this work, right?
You mentioned work you have coming up with a conference, I believe, in Northern California. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh, yeah. The EVO Sports Consciousness Group. So there's a group that I spoke with right before the lockdowns happened, that summer, actually, before that. And I'm doing a talk on the 24th. And I'll put a link in my bio, like on Instagram. And we're going to, we talk like this, we go crazy quantum, right? So if you liked what we talked about here, it's like, we'll talk about sports consciousness, quantum entanglement, I like to talk about quantum tunneling, which is a phenomenon in the quantum world where, you can send quarks of light through a solid object. And so I'm going to talk a lot about the quantum side of the sports energy medicine and how that relates to performance. And that'll be on the 24th. It's a Zoom call as well. And I think anyone can attend. I mean, anyone can attend, actually. Last time I did a talk, George Mumford, the godfather who wrote The Mindful Athlete, was there. And it was so, it's like, whoa, what? George Mumford's here. I've been watching and learning from him for years, and now he's listening to me. And I saw him taking notes one time when they showed the screen. And so anyway, people like that will be there. Some sports pioneers, Michael Murphy, who wrote In the Zone. So this group is pretty dynamic, and they kind of created some of this initial work that I've just been able to build on. Everything I have comes from listening, paying attention, reading books, and being intuitive, right? So I can't claim it. It comes from paying attention and being around the field and being in the field, right? And I mean, when I say field, I mean the cosmic field.
Michael Murphy, I think, is also the author of Golf in the Kingdom, yes?
Yes, Golf in the Kingdom. Yeah, so he's part of this group who's sponsoring the talk.
Got it. And are there other names we might recognize? Certainly George is a familiar name in this space.
Yeah, it's funny because there's a guy, Barry. There's so many names, but they're like the original. They're the OGs of the mental performance world, and so I haven't hung out with them since before COVID. So, but there are going to be lots of people weighing in on this conversation who people will go, whoa, that person's, interesting in sports, because most of them have written their own books, because there's like a board of people who've kind of run the organization.
Cool. So you said you'd put that link in your Instagram bio. What is your Instagram handle? Oh,
my Instagram handle is at Laura Mitchell Wilde. I couldn't get Laura M. Wilde, so it's a long one. Sorry about that, but you'll see me with the basketball. So it's easy to find me. Start typing in Laura Mitchell Wilde and you'll see the basketball.
Great. Thanks for that. And is there anything more that we haven't touched on at all that you want to touch on? Maybe a final message for parents, teachers, coaches?
Yeah, I would say that, finding our way to this state of relaxation or expansion, because if we can find the parasympathetic nervous system, which is rest and relax, then we can be more likely to expand and less likely to get thrown off our game by little tiny things. And so just thinking about coherence, which is why I brought this up, right? We want to think about our head and our heart being in coherence. And so when they're in coherence, we actually can get closer to the flow state. So head and heart tapping is really powerful. This is about coherence, and that allows our brain to shift a little bit, our nervous system to settle down a little bit, and then we can start to get closer to that flow state. And so I talk about flow state a lot on Instagram in my classes. So if you want more information, I'm happy to share with people. Please, I love when people reach out to me personally. I run my own Instagram account, so I do reply to people's questions and thoughts, and I love to geek it out. So anything anyone needs to hear more about, I'm happy to share.
Well, that's awesome. Really appreciate that. This is a resource that will be wonderful for our Fit Kids audience. And I just want to thank you for your time, your thoughtfulness, your energy, and it's always wonderful spending time with you.
Thank you, David. I appreciate it so much. Yeah, energy is one of our favorite topics of conversation. So thanks for sharing with me.